Hey, everybody. Welcome. Happy Monday. I am Julie Barrett, founder of Conservative Ladies of Washington, and we are continuing with our 2024 virtual tour with some of our endorsed candidates in the state of Washington. And tonight, I am live with Joe Kent running for Congress in Washington's 3rd Congressional District, which is Southwest Washington. And the primary ballots have already dropped in Washington state, and election day is August 6th. We are recommending that you fill out those ballots right away and get them turned back in. Now, Joe, when you ran in 2022 and CLW endorsed you at that time as well, I think you were our first, maybe our second endorsed candidate ever in the history of our organization. We all had kind of a different approach on the mail-in ballots, and it was kind of like hold it until the last minute so that they couldn't cheat. And now we've all kind of changed that to get them in as early as possible. As we just kind of, before we even jump into your campaign, I know you've been dealing with a lot of the election stuff. Can you talk about why we're doing it different this time?
Yeah, so the big lesson learned from last time was that as mad as everybody was post 2020, it felt good to hold our ballots until the very end and to vote on election day, because that's how most Republicans want to vote anyways. And there was the school of thought that said, hey, the longer we hold our ballots, the less chance they'll have of doing any kind of shenanigans. And that made sense. I still understand that argument, but the problem is we were 3 weeks short in collecting ballots. So we gave the Democrats basically three and a half week, in some cases, a head start in ballot collection. And with my race in particular, it's really good to look at. I lost by less than a percentage point, so about 2,600 votes. Now, we had 60,000 Republicans who voted for President Trump in 16 and in 20 who didn't even cast a ballot. They didn't participate in the primary or in the general election. And if you look at the trends of the district, unfortunately, this is typical. There's a lot of folks out there who share values with us, but they just don't think that they vote unless there's a president at the top of the ticket. So we could have been chasing down those 60,000 hardcore Republican Trump voters in the 3 weeks that we had, that we completely forfeited. Like the Democrats, they don't play this game. The second the ballots drop, they have their activists out there and they're ballot harvesting, which is completely legal in Washington state. I know most of us don't like this, and I wish we could change this law. But at the end of the day, the law says here in Washington that any person can go collect ballots from anybody, an unlimited amount, and go put them in a drop box or go put them down at the county auditor's office. So we don't like this system, but we are going to use the system to the fullest extent of the law, like the Democrats do this time.
Yep. Well said. I mean, it is a bad system that we don't like, but it is the law. And so if this is the game, then let's play by the rules and let's use it to our advantage. And so I know we have been talking to other GOP counties throughout the state, and a lot of them are working on ballot harvesting. So I'm sure down there, and you've got Clark County and Lewis County and all those different GOP that I know are working on ballot harvesting. So I imagine that those guys are chasing down Joe Kent voters as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got really good ballot harvesting teams at all the different county level GOPs. Clark's got their activists out there right now. I know Lewis does, Cowlitz does. Even our smaller counties, Skamania, Pacific County, Wahkiakum, all of them have some degree of ballot harvesting teams. It looks different basically in every county. It's a bit more challenging in some of the rural counties, but there is a lot of phone banking going on, and then just people going out and talking to their neighbors, people who just know where the older folks are in their community who have more of a challenge of actually getting that ballot to a drop box. So it's happening. Again, it's new for us Republicans. The Democrats have been doing this for a very long time. They have a well-oiled machine, a well-financed machine in many cases for ballot collection. But we are fully engaged. The state GOP and all the county GOPs have been very supportive.
Yeah, that's awesome. So for those of you in Washington's 3rd congressional districts that have your ballot sitting on your kitchen counter, go get that, fill it out. Make sure you vote Joe Kent for Congress in the 3rd district and get that into a drop box tomorrow. We did this, Joe, you and I did this. We were talking about this before we pushed the live button. We had a conversation back when you were running in 2021, 22, and probably talked about, I know your platform hasn't really changed a whole lot because the issues haven't changed, but I think we have seen a substantial decline in our country since your last race. We've seen a lot of the activity and coming over the border. We've seen a lot of that crime, illegal immigration. Just maybe talk about some of the, what you see as your biggest campaign priorities right now in 2024.
Yeah, so right now, I think the two biggest issues are the border, which ties in directly with law and order. Washington State has very much become a border state because we are a sanctuary state. So we have become a vector for the illegal immigrants to come here, but also the fentanyl. Washington has very, very loose drug control measures, thanks to Bob Ferguson and Jay Inslee and the Democrats in Olympia. So we've also become a haven for the fentanyl. And everywhere I go in the district, somebody will come up to me and they'll tell me how the fentanyl crisis has personally affected them. And all these stories are tragic. It usually involves an overdose, and these usually aren't career drug addicts that are overdosing. It's usually somebody who thought they had something that was harmless, like a Percocet off the black market or something like that, and they take it, and next thing you know, that they're dead, and the families are left, like what the heck happened? And this is happening all up and down the I-5 corridor, in particular in our parts of Clark County and Lewis County and Cowles County and Thurston that are right there on I-5. So that's become a key issue. My opponent, Marie Perez, she told us last time I debated that she did not care about the southern border security. And then she went to Congress and she voted to leave Biden's border wide open. She came back to the district and said, look, nobody loses sleep at night worrying about the southern border. She's changed her tune because she's seen the polling. She's seen that people are actually very concerned about this. This is having a real effect here in our communities. So she's now saying things like, oh, I'm standing up to Biden against the border. But the bottom line is her voting record doesn't reflect that. Every time it's gone up for a vote, she's voted to leave Biden's border wide open. The economy is another major issue. This cycle of inflation is destroying working families. And it's really being driven by Joe Biden's out of control spending. DC prints more money. That drives inflation. The money that they're printing, we're not seeing back here in the district. Biden's spending, 2.5 trillion over what we take in tax revenue every single year, supported by Democrats like Marie Perez. And we can't even get our bridges and roads repaired. We're not seeing a direct reflection here in the district. A lot of it's going to foreign aid, overseas wars, and just a lot of the other special interest groups that are funding the Democrats. And so the cycle of inflation's got to end. We got to get back to being energy independent. Marie's also voted against energy independence. So those are the big issues. And another issue, which I know is near and dear to you and your audience, is protection of our kids. I don't have to tell this audience about SB 5599 and the craziness that's happening in our schools, the gender ideology, and the way Washington State can essentially kidnap your kids. But at the federal level, House Republicans, with the thin majority they've attempted to throw us two lifelines. One was a parental bill of rights that just said, hey, if the states want access to federal education grant money, they have to show the parents transparency. Basic common sense. Perez and every Democrat voted against parental transparency. And then the Republicans put forward a bill that 10, 15 years ago would have been just unanimous because everybody would have agreed on it. They said, hey, women and men can't compete against each other in sports. Men can't compete against women in sports, and men can't go into women's spaces, locker rooms, bathrooms, dressing rooms. Perez and every single Democrat voted against that. They voted to put men into your daughter's dressing room. So these are really key issues. And when we talk about these key issues, I think even people who, maybe they have mixed feelings about President Trump, maybe they don't think they're Republican, but these three issues, just basic fiscal responsibility, law and order, protection of our kids, they're so common sense. I think that's really a winning message for us because the left has gone so far off the rails.
Yeah, they really have. And, you touched on the parental rights and the 5599 and allowing boys into girls' spaces. And we can't even, the Democrats can't even define what a woman is, right? Although yesterday with the news of, Biden's news, which we'll get into here in a bit, but all of a sudden we need to have a woman president. But, last week we couldn't even define a woman. So it's weird.
Yep.
But I think that, what's that?
Oh, I said, yeah, crazy times. This
totally crazy. But because they've gone off the rails and such crazy times, you do have those moderates and people that probably would have considered themselves Democrats that are like, wait, boys can be girls and girls can be boys, and you want them to participate on my daughter's soccer team? No, this is where we draw the line. So it's an opportunity for us to bring a common sense message to the American voters.
It really is. And what I think is important for us, and Marie Perez is actually a great example. When she gets out there and she talks, the little bit that she actually talks in public, she'll never say, "Hey, I voted to put men into your daughter's dressing room." She won't talk about that at all. She'll talk about like a grant that she got here or there. She'll sound like a moderate. The Columbian and the media will cover her as a moderate. But this is why I'm working really hard to expose her voting record, because at the end of the day, like, her words and her rhetoric, it really doesn't matter. When I ran against her 2 years ago, she could say whatever she wanted. She didn't have a voting record. But for the last 2 years, anytime any of these just out of control, crazy leftist bills have come up, she's voted for them. She hasn't talked about it, but she voted to put men into your daughter's dressing room, voted for the wide open southern border. I mean, so this is her voting record. And this, again, this is a strong suit. I like to call it our Republican superpower, is that we can actually talk about the issues. The Democrats have to either do identity politics, they have to do the politics of personal destruction, ad hominem attacks, they have to create new boogeymen like Project 2025 or whatever, because they can't talk about their voting records, because their voting records to normal Americans who maybe don't even have a political affiliation or are common sense Democrats, they're like, wait a sec, my representative voted for what? So exposing their record is a key part of my campaign. I think it's a winning message for most Republicans.
Yeah, you're right. It's huge. And one of the things that we've noticed, and you pointed this out on X, I think it was probably 2 weeks ago now, but, and I forget what the bill was that was voted on in Congress, but they allowed for vulnerable Democrats to vote with the Republicans on it. I forget which one it was, but you made the point of that they allowed her to do that because she is in a vulnerable seat, and it would have looked very bad to her district had she voted against it.
Yeah, it was the SAVE Act, basically Republicans
That's it.
preventing illegals from voting in our elections. But what people have to remember, and actually Democrats are counting on most Americans not understanding how Congress actually functions. Before a bill goes forward onto the floor for the bill itself to be voted on, there's a procedural vote to put the bill on the floor in the first place. So the move usually is to try to kill bills that you don't like in the crib before they even see the light of day on the floor for a vote. Marie Perez has never voted against her party on a procedural vote. So the first vote for the SAVE Act, are we going to put the SAVE Act on the floor? Every single Democrat voted against even putting the SAVE Act on the floor. So Perez tried to kill that bill in the crib. Once the Republicans overpowered that vote and said, no, we're going to put everybody on the record, we're going to put that bill on the actual floor, that's when the 5 most vulnerable Democrats, Perez included, were allowed by leadership, because they knew they had already lost the vote, but Schumer would kill it in the Senate. They let the 5 vulnerable Democrats vote there. That's why if you actually go to and this is kind of cumbersome to do, but if you go to the actual House roll call, you'll usually see 2 or 3 different votes on a bill before the actual vote that counts. Right. And those are procedural votes.
Yeah, and we try to pull those roll call votes and show the process, because so many people don't understand the process of, something will pass in the House and everybody's like, oh, they passed a new law and Joe Biden's gonna sign it now. And so many people, and shame on our education system, but so many people don't understand the process. And so it's good to educate people and to have candidates like yourself who are talking about the process, because it is so important and citizens can engage. We've been engaging them on a state level, but also on a federal level to make sure that.
Yeah, they really count on most people not understanding this. And this is something that I think maybe I learned back in high school, but I forgot about until I was running for Congress. And I look at the congressional record basically every time they vote, and it's confusing. Like it's intentionally confusing. There's a much simpler way to explain this, but they don't do it. They make you dig for the information and understanding procedure. That's why a lot of times when you hear Republicans doing their inner fighting, which Republicans tend to do publicly, they will talk about how the Freedom Caucus won't vote for the rule. They won't vote for the procedure. And some people don't like that, but I think it's great, because you actually have Republicans that are saying, hey, I won't just go along with whatever my party says. Whereas the Democrats, like, they are a military unit. They will do exactly what the most senior ranking Democrat tells them to do every single time. So it's important that people understand the process.
Yeah, understanding the process, and also understanding that the Democrats are very strategic with their votes. So if they're voting against their party, there's probably something going on behind the scenes that the people don't know about.
Exactly. Yeah. So the Republicans, we have our fights out in the open. We saw that with the fight over the speakership and all that. So I don't feel like Republicans, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, like we don't tend to have too many secrets because we just kind of lay it all out there. The Democrats are much more disciplined, and I think that makes them a more effective political force. But at the same time, like everything is strategic, everything is theater with these guys, and people just have to keep that in mind.
So there are a number of the issues that we've talked about are really issues that apply to Americans across the nation, right? Which is why all Americans should, if they haven't yet, they should donate to your campaign. I think it's joekentforcongress.com. So go drop some money in the campaign because we need Joe in Washington, D.C. But what are some of the specific issues to your district or Washington state that you would like to deal with in Congress?
So I definitely want to get the parental bill of rights back up there. I'm against the federal Department of Education, but if we can't completely kill the federal Department of Education, I do want us to offensively use the education grants to make sure parents, bare minimum, have transparency. But also to cut out a lot of the nonsense that's being taught in the schools. Like if we're going to give federal education grant money, the only thing it should be used for is to teach kids, how to read, write, how their government works, history, those types of things. It shouldn't be for DEI, CRT, and all that. And then look, we've really got to pass some legislation saying that parents are the primary stakeholder in their kids' education. Parents have a right to know everything that's taking place, in particular health decisions that are being made. In an attempt to block a lot of what's taking place in states like Washington, and then to keep biological men out of women's sports. I think that's huge. We have a major infrastructure problem here too. The I-5 crossing between Oregon and Washington really affects Clark County, Southwest Washington. The federal government has just been derelict. This is a project that is a clear-cut federal nexus. It's interstate commerce. It's I-5. I think we need the federal government to come in with a very, very serious package that's going to give us a third bridge to actually give us real congestion relief, a ring road to bypass Portland and Vancouver for all the through transit of trucking that goes through our district, and then brings the current bridge up to code and maintains that basically as a local bridge between Portland and Vancouver. Now, what Perez has done is she's gotten a little bit of money allocated here, not enough money to actually do any kind of congestion relief, but enough money that's going to give the federal government an ability to put light rail on the bridge. Light rail is going to connect downtown Portland with downtown Vancouver and right up the I-5 corridor. And don't take my word for it. Jay Inslee basically said this is exactly what they're going to do. Light rail is going to connect Portland to Seattle. So us here stuck in the middle in the third district, we are going to get dumped on by downtown Portland and downtown Seattle. Now, the media says Joe Kent's against light rail. And yeah, I am against light rail, but I didn't just pull this idea out of a hat somewhere. Every single time light rail has been on the ballot, the voters in Clark County have rejected it. And so I'm saying, hey, if we're going to use federal funding, which we should, to construct this new bridge, then light rail cannot be a part of it whatsoever. Now, the local bridge, if they want to put light rail on that, it needs to go on the ballot. It can't just be done by executive edict. That's just not how our government should be set up and should function. And I'm confident the voters in Clark County will continue to reject it. Also, deregulation of our natural resources. We've got way too much federal regulation involved in our fisheries. We've had overregulation with the salmon industry, especially with the way that sea lions are eating up a lot of our fish because they're on the endangered species list. We've got to be able to cull the herd of sea lions and all the different other predators that are taking away our salmon runs. Deregulating the timber industry as well. I mean, we killed off the timber industry a couple of decades ago, and now the forests aren't managed, and tragically they burn, and all the jobs were lost that used to be made in the forest. And that was a real hindrance on the economy. And again, this is because of federal government overreach, and Perez and Democrats continue to vote for these policies that gives Washington, D.C. the ability to regulate our natural resources. So those are the issues locally here that I'm very passionate about.
Do you think that I-5 bridge is something that we get bipartisan support?
I think so. I mean, I think it's possible. And unfortunately, there's a lot of incentives for the Portland side because it's a bigger city. They have more congressional representation. There's a big incentive there for them to really front load a lot of the infrastructure on the Oregon and the Portland side. That's where the light rail issue comes in. We don't want light rail for all the reasons I discussed. The Portland side wants the light rail because they want to upgrade their entire system on the federal buck. and then just say, hey, this also cuts into Washington, so it's all federal. It's not just Oregon. So therefore, the federal government gets to pay for it as well. So I think if all things were equal and the states had equal representation, then it could be a bipartisan issue. But unfortunately, there's a lot of heavy green type of Democrats in the Portland area, and they're going to make this all about mass transit. So I'd be willing to work with Democrats that just actually want to build a ring road around Portland and Vancouver and make sure we get traffic relief and we build a third bridge. To me, that seems like it should be pretty clear cut and bipartisan. And when I get to Congress, I'll try to make those inroads with the Democrats. I am a little skeptical that they're not going to try and just make this into a massive light rail project.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I would tend to agree based on what we've seen. That seems like the direction they would want to go. Elizabeth is in the chat asking, can you talk more about what happened with the timber industry? Can you kind of go into a little bit of background with that?
Yeah, I mean, in the 80s, I mean, I think it started in the late 70s. There was the whole issue. I mean, the green ideology at the time said, like, if we keep logging, then we're just going to run out of forests, completely negating the fact that most people in the timber industry understand how to manage our forests. And then there was the issue of the spotted owl, which was put on the endangered species list. And basically, the green lobby said, hey, the spotted owl is basically all up and down the West Coast, in particular in the Pacific Northwest, and it killed off the timber industry. So we lost the ability to actually go out and harvest our own timber. So a lot of the forests just simply were shut down. And now the timber industry provided a lot of jobs, but it also gave forest management. Most of the species of trees here, the Doug firs, a lot of them need direct access to sunlight. So either you can cut them down and create a small section of clear cut to give the new saplings direct access to the sunlight, or what Mother Nature does is she has wildfires. And there's wildfires basically that create that clear cut. So basically the way our forests work is you can harvest the timber and you can make jobs and you can have a thriving economy off of it, or you can not manage the forest and there will be forest fires. There'll be wildfires. But there was wildfires before there was even humans out here. There's plenty of evidence of that. But under the guise of the spotted owl and, air quotes, preserving the forest, we basically shut down the vast majority of the thriving timber industry. And unfortunately, a lot of the mills that would process lumber and process pulp and paper, there's a huge one in Camas that's basically been cut in half. A lot of those jobs were sent overseas. Same thing, the same reason why there was a lot of the manufacturing base shipped out of the Midwest. So government overregulation destroyed that. And now the tragedy is every summer, because our forests aren't maintained, and also the logging companies used to really maintain the logging roads, a network of logging roads throughout the forest. So that way, when a real forest fire was actually spotted, they could immediately get fire crews to those locations. Now we'll spot a lot of these forest fires right when they flare up because we got great technology to do that. But we can't get fire crews there because the roads aren't maintained. And all this happened because of government overreach. And so I would like to see the federal government take the spotted owls off the endangered species list and us getting back to actually responsibly managing our timber, and then re-onshoring a lot of that lumber and pulp and paper manufacturing right here to the Northwest.
And of course, that goes in conflict with their whole climate change agenda, because these forest fires help feed their narrative. So
yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny. Like they're sort of anti-science. I mean, they basically say like, well, the climate's getting hotter because of CO2 emissions, and because the climate gets hotter, therefore the forests just catch on fire. I mean, like I said, the forest fires have been around for a while. Yeah, sometimes it's people being careless, of course, in the forest during the summer. But lightning strikes, there's lots of other things that start forest fires. And so if you care about the forest fires, then you would want a thriving and healthy timber industry. But like you said, it fits in because you get the smoke in the air. It gets very dramatic. And they say, oh, my gosh, this is because of the increased temperatures. And so it has become very much a propaganda war to support the green agenda.
Yeah, and just another reason to add to the list of why it's so important to have a victory in this race, to pick up more. This was for those that don't know, this seat was a Republican seat up until 2022 with Jamie Herrera Butler, who voted to impeach Trump. So it's time to grab that seat back, and this is what we need to do to start, stopping some of this crazy stuff that the Democrats are doing to our country. So there's been a lot of excitement in our country in the last couple weeks. I don't know if it's I don't know if excitement is the right word, but a lot to talk about. We knew that things were going to get interesting going into this election cycle, and I think, to say the least, I'd love to hear your thoughts on we had the Secret Service gal, Cheadle was in the I forget which committee it was. I know you know. This morning today, and talking about getting questioned by the committee for the Trump assassination attempt. What are your thoughts on that? I know you've been very vocal about the J6 committee, and now we need a J13 committee. Like, it seems like the Democrats don't really like, they want to turn this into a gun control argument. I'd just love for you to talk about your thoughts on all of this.
Yeah, I mean, everybody by now has seen the footage from the rally where Trump, by the grace of God, was not assassinated. I mean, that bullet came within a fraction of an inch of killing him and drastically changing our country. And I think if you've seen that footage and you've seen the lay of the land there, you don't need to have a military background like I do to understand that it's completely ridiculous that that building wasn't secure. And if you start learning a little bit about how the shooter got there, how far out he was identified, none of the official story makes any kind of sense. And as you pointed out today before the Oversight Committee, the director of the Secret Service went there and essentially answered no questions and told the congressman kind of to pound sand and that they were going to look into it in like 60 days. So none of this passes like just the common sense test on how it happened. And then also there was no press conference afterwards. There was no explanation to the American people. They're basically telling us just to shut up and they'll get to us whenever they feel like it, which does not cut it at all. Like we pay these people salaries. We pay their salaries to protect former presidents and presidential candidates, especially the front runner for the Oval Office here in November. So for her to go there and before Congress, like, unfortunately, it was predictable because that's been the status quo now for quite a while under the Obama administration and then under the Biden administration as well. Mayorkas basically thumbed his nose at the Oversight Committee with his explanation of why the border remains open as Americans are being killed by fentanyl overdoses. So I've been attempting to be pretty clear and just say, hey, look, the hearings are great, questioning these people, getting them on record, showing the American people just how they're stonewalling and they're not cooperating. That's important, but that's not going to have any effect. There's only one thing these agencies understand, and that is power. And from the congressional perspective, that comes in two ways. You either start cutting off their funding, and at the same time, you form an official committee like the Democrats did with the January 6th committee. You assign a special counsel, you give that committee a budget, you give them investigatory power, you give them subpoena power. Because I don't care what the Secret Service director says. I want to see their actual email chains. I want to see their text messages. I want to see their encrypted radio communications, everything that's classified. Like, you get the appropriate investigators, the appropriate clearances, they can get access to all of that. And if they can't get access to all of that, then people need to be held in contempt. Steve Bannon's sitting in jail right now. Peter Navarro's sitting in jail right now. The Supreme Court backs them up that, what they're being held for, what they were held for, isn't legitimate. That a lot of that's still being adjudicated. But this right here is clear cut. We could easily subpoena this information, and it should be. So I've already heard Speaker Johnson kind of talk about this and hint at it. So I hope they call a full July 13th committee and commission and actually have a real official investigation to get to the bottom of this before the Secret Service, the FBI, and all these other entities that are clearly stonewalling have a chance to either, cover their tracks for incompetence or cover their tracks for something else. And as evasive as they're being right now, I don't think it's unreasonable to say it seems like there's some degree of a plot to kill President Trump that was noticed by people in the Secret Service, and they either let it happen or some of them were in on it. I mean, there's no other way to look at it until they prove us wrong. And maybe they will. Maybe that's what the investigation will get to the bottom of. It just needs to be investigated. While that's going on, I do think Congress needs to exercise some of the power they have and say, hey, we are freezing a large chunk of the Secret Service's budget and we are going to give a portion of that budget to the Trump campaign. So President Trump's team can actually hire independent security, if nothing else, but then to also look over the shoulder of the Secret Service and just say, hey, we're going to double check everything you guys are doing from now on, because you let a 20-year-old get on a roof 400 feet away from the president and take a shot at him, or take a couple shots at him. I think that'd be completely reasonable. And that would also send a message to the Secret Service and the DHS that, like, look, we're not playing around. We're going to start taking away some of your money.
Well, and what was, it's tragic enough that they, and, horrendous enough that they would try to take out a former president and most likely the next president. Where nobody's surprised, right? Like, I think that we could all probably agree that anybody, Donald Trump is a huge target to be assassinated. And I would also encourage people to pray for his protection over these next few months, please. But also the fact that an innocent man lost his life.
Yes.
And fortunately it wasn't more people. I mean, it could have easily been more people. And these Congress people today were asking the Secret Service director, would you say that having access to an AR-15 has made your job harder? I mean, their agenda is so obvious, it's infuriating. But you see where they're going.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's nothing more than them trying to push forward their obvious political agenda of gun control. And this is, I think even most Americans that maybe even don't share the same passion for the Second Amendment that Republicans do, I think most Americans saw that and they were just like, what are you guys doing? Like, you guys are just so blatantly partisan. Because even if you don't support President Trump, those events were very, very disturbing, I think, for any American. That's not the way our system's supposed to work. Political assassinations aren't supposed to take place here. So for the Democrats to push that partisan nonsense, they should be embarrassed, but we shouldn't be surprised. Again, that's why, like, when we have these just, hearings where they come and testify, it's kind of just an opportunity for a lot of congressmen, unfortunately, to get a good soundbite for their preferred media outlet. That's going to get them,
Yes.
A good fundraising email. There's no teeth behind it. That's why I really strongly advocate us going after the funding and then a full committee with actual subpoena power.
And how quickly could Speaker Johnson form that committee right away?
I think he can do it immediately. Honestly, the RNC was great. It was great that we had, that actual convention, and it was positive and it was uplifting to see President Trump. But I was kind of disappointed that a lot of the congressmen and senators stayed there for, like, the festivities. I feel like they should have gone back immediately and just started getting to work. But look, the Democrats assembled the J6 committee right away, and they started issuing subpoenas, and they were going after people, and they were going for the jugular, and they meant business. We've got to get just as serious, if not more serious than they do. I think it's going to happen here pretty soon, especially after the director's performance. I think it's evident to everybody that they're not, the FBI, the DHS, the Secret Service are not going to cooperate. So I have confidence in Speaker Johnson. I think he's going to do the right thing here.
Awesome. I hope so. And I hope it happens fast, because we can't let this go. I mean, this has got to be something that Republicans do more than their strongly worded letter. So,
yeah, exactly.
So let's talk a little bit about the RNC. So Trump has a VP pick in JD Vance. What are your thoughts on that? What do you think of JD Vance and this ticket?
I couldn't be happier, honestly, especially after they attempted to assassinate President Trump. Having a very strong young VP who shares a lot of the vision of the new Republican Party, the Republican Party of President Trump, America First. JD Vance is very well spoken. He's very well read, really, really well versed on America First policies. So honestly, I was ecstatic. I would have obviously supported whoever President Trump picked as his VP, but big, hat tip to him and to his team for selecting JD Vance. And they're taking a risk. I mean, JD is a freshman senator. doesn't have any other political experience. But they picked a guy who, like myself, fought in our post 9/11 wars, and he didn't do it as like a lawyer or an officer or something like that. He did it as an enlisted Marine at the height of the violence in Iraq. So he's a guy that I share a lot of common threads with. But then he went off to excel in other ventures, in the Ivy Leagues. He paid for that with his GI Bill, really cool, and then he worked in Silicon Valley. So he's got a lot of, I think, unique experience to bring to the table. But in particular, JD and the way that he views foreign policy, I think is really, really essential because it's aligned with President Trump. He's not one of these people that's looking to get us involved in, a new war every 5 minutes or to send billions and billions of dollars to Ukraine. As a matter of fact, JD really led the way. He went to the NATO Security Conference to really articulate our stake and to say, look, the new Republican Party is not behind this. We are not going to be the world's police force. We've got problems at home. We've got to put our people first. And that's really important, I think, for a vice president. Usually VPs, they can get a pretty heavy foreign policy portfolio. And for JD to go in there basically as a huge middle finger to the neoconservative establishment and really to whatever you want to call it, the deep state, the national security state blob, the people that want us engaged in these wars and to prioritize the security of the rest of the world, I think that's really strong. I know JD a little bit. We've met a few times. So I definitely personally like him, but also just the way that he's ideologically aligned with us. I couldn't be happier.
Do you think having someone like JD, I mean, obviously him being young, I think is great, especially with, the age thing being part of the issue with the ticket. But I think Donald Trump's age and Joe Biden's age is what I'm referring to there. But, and kind of like you see this, like the new, like you said, the new Republican Party and kind of the new generation of the Republican Party. I think it's kind of exciting to see someone of his age on the ticket. And I'm curious how does he work with other America First people like Matt Gaetz and Jim Jordan and some of those other people in Congress currently? Is that kind of a tight unit?
It definitely is. I mean, JD's already been a leader in the Senate just in the short 2 years that he's been there. And he's very aligned with the Freedom Caucus types, with Rand Paul, in particular, especially with like foreign policy, like I talked about, but also really rethinking the way that Republicans view economic affairs, the way that we're more protectionist and we want to actually use tariffs to bring back American manufacturing, protect American jobs. I mean, in JD's acceptance speech, he talked about how we're done with foreign labor. You never would have heard a Republican say that years and years ago. I mean, JD basically saying that we are going to build it here in America with American hands, and we're going to use the power of government to ensure that happens and to ensure that like our manufacturing base and our jobs aren't shipped overseas. I mean, that's really why Trump won the Rust Belt before, but that's also one of the other major reasons why a lot of the Republican establishment hated President Trump, because there's a lot of moneyed interests in shipping our jobs overseas, because the foreign labor is a great deal for the guys on Wall Street. And so JD going in there and saying that, I think it's groundbreaking. And then that really aligns with those younger types in Congress and the people who are just rethinking the way that Republicans view foreign affairs and the economy. So again, I just think it's awesome now. Trump was like the shock to the system. And then I think the system hoped they were going to recover, but there's just been guys running in the breach after President Trump and really putting a lot of teeth behind a lot of these ideas. And JD's one of them. And I think he's going to mesh really, really well with everybody down the ticket in President Trump's new Republican Party.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm super excited about it. I think it's a great ticket. And I was super excited to see that's who he picked, because a lot of the other names, there were a lot of other great names in the hat, but he's just kind of this new, fresh face that brings a different kind of energy that I think the American people are just ready for that. So let's talk a little bit about the Democrat nominee, because apparently Joe Biden tweeted that he's not going to be running anymore. Nobody's seen him. Where's Joe?
Yeah, again, I mean, like you saw this one coming, kind of, sort of like we did. Like first they tried to imprison Trump, take him off the ballot, and so this was kind of a logical conclusion. It was shocking when it happened in the moment, and I think a lot of us thought for a while now, for years actually, that Biden wasn't going to run in 2024, but after their primary and the closer we got to the actual event, I think a lot of us had thought, well, I guess they are just going to go forward with Biden. And then that catastrophic debate happened. In every single American, even Americans who haven't been paying attention to politics like we have for the last 3 years, they just saw that the guy's gone. He's not there. And so like the charade went so far that like they couldn't even prop up the emperor of no clothing anymore, so to speak. But the problem was Biden and his wife and a lot of people in his family and inner circle, they had a mind of their own, and they dug in and they said, no, we're not leaving. And then all of a sudden Biden's out there a week ago saying like, the only reason I'd step aside is health concerns. And then like a day later, he's like, I have COVID. And that's like the last time we saw Biden in public. And so then Biden, whatever it was yesterday, releases like a really weird tweet saying like, oh yeah, I'm not going to run. And then a couple hours later, he's like, and by the way, I'm endorsing Kamala Harris. It's like, this would normally be the type of thing that the president would at least address the American people and say it to the camera. We can hear it come out, the words come out of his mouth. You know, we've had this happen before in our history. You know, I'm not going to run. I'm going to step aside, whatever. But like it just getting put on the internet, like on Twitter, is bizarre. And then there was that really weird, awkward call. He like called into a Kamala Harris rally and like he didn't Zoom or FaceTime. Like we're talking here on StreamYard, you know, we can see each other. He didn't even do that. It was like he called in as if it was like calling into a radio station. And it just sounded weird. And so look, it has like a, I don't want to be hyperbolic, but it kind of has a palace coup type of feel. Like they're like, hey, we are forcing this dude out and we're not going to let him get in front of a camera and say anything. We're going to prepare everything. He's going to sign the documents. We're going to make sure the pardons are lined up for the family, and Jill's going to get some money. And like, this is just happening, which, look, again, the Democrats are very, very good at running their machine. But if you're a Democrat primary voter right now and you supported Biden in 2020 and you're like, that's my guy, I'm sticking by him for whatever reason, and you voted for him in the primary, you should be furious right now because the Democrat Party basically just said, we don't care about your votes. You have like these different states that are coming out now saying like, oh, we've converted our Biden delegates into Harris delegates. It's like, did you guys ask the people about that? I mean, that's the most preposterous thing ever. So, you know, I'm not trolling here, but I'm pretty happy that I'm actually in a party that respects my vote.
Isn't that all really a threat to democracy?
Right. Yeah, there's something very Machiavellian right now, like where the Democrats are like, we have to destroy democracy to save democracy. Yeah, I mean, like it's like they always are doing the thing that they're accusing us of. And like, this is just, I mean, this is probably one of the biggest examples of it. Like we've been told that you and I are threats to democracy, you know, for the last 3 or 4 years now. Right. And any Trump supporter is, even anybody who questions like the 2020 election or any of these types of things. If you question COVID, I mean, you are a threat to democracy. And now the Democrats were just like, yeah, so we're not doing democracy right now. We know you guys kind of thought we were doing democracy, but we're not. And this is going to be the candidate, and everybody get in line and shut up. It's like, it's pretty wild to see. It's like out of a Tom Clancy novel or something.
It is totally wild. And you know, that Harris rally that Joe Biden supposedly called into today, you cannot convince me that was not AI. I 100% believe that was AI.
Yeah, and I mean, Harris isn't like a gifted orator anyways, but it really sounded like she started to say record, and then she was going to say recording, and then she kind of cut herself short. And you're right. I mean, Biden sounded choppy. Biden sounds weird anyways. He sounded weird on the debate stage. So like, it's one of those things where things have gotten so weird anyways that you can't tell, is it weird fake or is it real weird? Like it's anybody's guess at this point. But I think it's bizarre, just like everything involving the assassination attempt on Trump. Like they're not even attempting to answer any of our questions. That's really, really weird. And now with Biden, they're not even attempting to show us Biden. Like, I mean, this guy is being shuffled around or hidden somewhere. And it's like business as usual with the Democrats. It's like nobody's saying anything, but no one's seen Biden. Like, that's absolutely bizarre.
And is no one concerned about Joe's health? I mean, I don't even, like, nobody's talking about him. Yeah, it's completely bizarre. And so help me understand, because this is like kind of uncharted territory, but not completely. What happens next? Like, it seems like Kamala's the presumptive, you know, nominee, but don't they have to go through some kind of process to officially make her the nominee? How's all this going to work?
Yeah, so I think this either Saturday or Sunday is when they basically start their virtual roll call, like when all the delegates kind of report in. And then later on in August, I think it's the second week of August, maybe, they go to Chicago to actually have their convention. But their conventions are different than the Republican convention because they have those super delegates that can kind of overrule the regular delegates. I mean, this is basically how this is kind of how Bernie got the short end of the stick twice, because Bernie had more delegates, I think, in 16, or actually in 16 and then in 2020. But both times they were just like, yeah, you're not going to go, Bernie. Like, we're going to actually just push forward our preferred candidate. So this is kind of baked into the cake where the Democrat elite actually get to choose the nominee. But I do think, because a lot of this is boiling out into the public, I do think we're going to see a power struggle, because I think a lot of the older Democrats are not happy with Kamala. I think a lot of them were like, hey, Kamala was just sort of there as kind of a DEI hire anyways. That's evident. But I think there's a lot of people in the Democrat Party who are like, no, this is now her time. So it's going to be interesting to see who she selects as a VP, if she goes for a more moderate or if she doubles down and says, hey, I'm just going to pick another, person, woman, whatever, that checks all the right boxes. So I think we're going to see a pretty intense. The Republican, the RNC wasn't that interesting. There were some good speeches, but mostly it was just like happy and everybody was united. There wasn't any big disagreements. I think that the DNC is going to be wild, because even before all this happened with Biden and Harris, you already had the Hamas issue, the Hamas-Israel issue, that was ripping the Democrat caucus apart. I mean, you've got a really vocal activist base that is aligned with Hamas, and they're going after basically your traditional Democrats. So that's going to be playing out at the same time. This power struggle is going to be playing out with the DNC. So I personally think it's going to be chaos. I honestly don't really have a solid prediction if they're going to stick with Harris or if they're going to try and slide somebody else that they think has a better chance. But they're obviously very, very nervous about the momentum that Republicans have right now.
Yeah, Patty's saying in the chat, breaking news that Kamala Harris earns enough delegates to win Democratic nomination, according to Reuters, 47 minutes ago. So I was just kind of scrolling through here to see if I could find it. I'm just looking on X. I don't see it, but I think I know Patty, so I know she wouldn't.
It wouldn't surprise me. That'd be smart for them to do, so that there wasn't like a procedural bloodbath, so to speak, on the floor there when they actually come into session. So it sounds like they're closing ranks around Kamala. So like they're going to show up in Chicago and just be like, nope, Kamala's our girl. Everybody show up and get on board. I guess. I don't know. That seems like if that's true and they've already given her all the delegates that she needs, then I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how the rest of the Democrat Party actually accepts that, because Kamala didn't even make it through the first round of presidential debates in 2020. I mean, she wasn't popular with Democrat presidential voters then. So I guess we'll see.
It would kind of be akin to the establishment Republicans, deciding who was going to be the Republican nominee and all the conservative America First people not having it. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Do you think this, how will this impact, I guess, not only the Trump campaign, but also does it have any impact on your campaign and how you campaign?
I think it's really important for us just to stay consistent on highlighting how bad the Democrats' policies are, because Democrats like Perez, I mean, Marie was trying to distance herself from Biden like before the debate was even over. Like that debate went so sideways that Perez was like, all right, I can't stand by this guy anymore. And a lot of the so-called moderate Democrats were doing that. And it's a bait and switch, because they're basically trying to say like, all those really bad policies, like, it's all this other guy. We're going to get rid of this other guy. And I swear I've changed. And so I think it's really important for us to say, like, look, it doesn't matter who's at the top of the ticket. These guys supported these policies. A great question to ask Perez and any other Democrat is like, hey, if Joe Biden's so bad and Joe Biden needs to go, why did you vote for all of his policies? Because you didn't ever really split with him in any meaningful way. On the big things that are destroying America, the border, the economy, they voted in lockstep with all the worst policies of Joe Biden. So just because you pick somebody else to put forward, like it doesn't really, if they keep Kamala, it definitely doesn't work. It's like, well, you just picked Biden's VP. So at the end of the day, I just think we need to really, really stay focused. It's fun to try and figure out what the Democrats are going to do and focus on how messed up their top ticket is. But I think we just stay consistent on pointing out how these people have voted, how they've governed, and how we actually have a vision, a common sense vision for the future. I think that's really important. Don't let them make the discussion about, oh, is it Biden? Is it Harris? Was it good that Biden went? Was it bad? Because then they're just going to try and pin all the bad policies on Biden and be like, look, we fixed it.
Yeah, I think that, with everything in our country being so chaotic and unpredictable right now, the Republican candidates, the Republican Party has a really big opportunity here to be the side of sanity and common sense. And hey, we're gonna get this thing back on track. And I think it's a huge opportunity, and I hope that the Republican Party at large will seize the opportunity, and that this will be, I believe God's hand is in everything. And I hope that this is God's way of waking up more people. I'm staying with my parents right now, and they had NBC News on last night, and NBC News was talking about how the interest rates have, risen so much in the last, 3.5 years since Biden took office. Well, they wouldn't have talked about that on Saturday, but all of a sudden, now that Biden's out, now we're going to talk about, the reality that we are all living in, and we all know all too well.
That's exactly right. And we just need to highlight how, hey, every single Democrat voted for these policies. Like, it wasn't, after that debate especially, it should be evident to everybody, this wasn't Joe Biden calling these shots. That Biden hasn't been in charge of anything the entire time he's been in office. It has been a group around him supported by the Democrat apparatus. They all voted for these policies. And we actually have a way forward to fix what's wrong with our country, whether it's the economy or the border. And so if we stay consistent on that, again, I think, like you said, we'll be the voice of reason. We will be the steady point in a very, very chaotic world right now. And I think it's a good thing for us. It's a bad thing that our country's, in these dire straits. But the Democrats having this internal fight that's spilling out into the public, I think it is a great opportunity just for us to say, hey, look, we're common sense. We're normal. We basically just want to get America back on track. These other guys are having all kinds of other fights about other things that really don't affect your daily life. But we actually have a way to make your life better.
Yeah. Yep. And that's what people want. They've been hurting in their, pocketbook. They're hurt and at the grocery store, at the gas pump, at school, their kids aren't getting educated. So there's huge place where we can come in and be the voice of sanity. Just want your time is very valuable, so I don't want to keep you too much longer, but I would like to close with, tell people what they can do to support your campaign. Do you need volunteers? Do you need doorbellers? Do you need money? What can people do to support the Joe Kent campaign?
We need all of it. So all of the above, really. If you can donate, there's no donation that's too small. I get people all the time that say like, hey, I can only donate $5, $10. Like, that actually is a lot. And we can do a lot with that if that's all that you can do. And if you can make it a reoccurring donation between now and November, where it's $5, you're essentially buying me a fancy coffee at Starbucks every month. Like, that actually is going to get us a lot of bang for our buck. So last time I ran, I raised about 3.5 million, and we did it all off small dollar donations. Like, the Republican apparatus was going against me. I didn't have any corporate PAC money. I'm still not taking any corporate PAC money because I don't want to be attached to it. So small dollar donors are how we thrive. JoeKentForCongress.com is the place to do it. But obviously, if Biden and Inslee, if you're here in the state, are taking all your money, I totally get it. Manpower is really, really key, especially right now. You can volunteer at JoeKentForCongress.com too. And we have all kinds of volunteer work. I know not everybody wants to knock on doors. If you do like knocking on doors, we got lots of work. We got lots of doors to knock on. Ballots to cure here, probably in about 2 or 3 weeks. Ballots to harvest. We always need help with that. But if you can't get out there and you don't like getting out there, we always need people to phone bank. We always need people to do text messages. If you like working with your hands but not talking with people, you can join our sign team, going out and actually putting up our big 4x8 signs on the highway and on main roads. That helps out a lot too. So I'm really powered by my volunteers every step of the way, whether it's donations or whether it's actually the sweat that goes into the campaign. So JoeKentForCongress.com is the touch point there. Another big thing too that you can do, especially if you live here in the district, if you know people that are on the fence and they're not traditional Republicans, invite them to come out to one of my town halls. But if they can't do that, I get it. People are busy. If you go on my website, after you scroll down past the little drop box that asks you for money, there's a little yellow drop box that says "Learn the Truth About Marie." If you click on that, that's going to take you to a separate website that has basically every egregious vote that Marie Perez has taken. It's going to explain what the bill is, and then it's going to let you click on it and go right to the House roll call so you can see for yourself. So for people who are like, well, I think Perez is kind of a moderate because the newspaper says she is, just do me a favor and send out that Truth About Marie page that you can find right there on my website. It's also at mariewatch.com. Send that out and help us expose her voting record. That's absolutely key for us to flip the seat here in November.
That's awesome. So ballots have dropped. Get your ballots in, vote for Joe, get that ballot in a Dropbox. We're still recommending Dropbox over putting it back in your mailbox, and right, that's more secure.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Get it in a Dropbox. They're all over. You can go to votewa.gov to find out there should be a Dropbox there. We also have on our website, conservativeladiesofwa.com, we have a voter center, and you go in and you put your address in, and it'll bring up all of the resources specific to your address. It'll have your ballot. It'll have lots of resources too, including those ballot drop boxes. So you can check that out on our website too. But please, if everyone would that's watching this, whether you're watching it live or on replay, if you would just go over to joekentforcongress.com and chip in $5 or $10 more if you can, but that would be huge. That's a great thing, easy thing that you can do to support an America First candidate who's going to work really hard to get our country back on track. So Joe, thanks for joining me. It's great to see you again. I am really praying for victory. I think this is our year, and I know you'll do great things for Washington State and America in Washington, D.C. God bless you, and we'll keep following you and doing everything we can to support your campaign.
Thank you so much, Julie. It was great to be with you and all your listeners and viewers too.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. Have a great night. Night, everybody.
Thank you. You too.